Hello! You are watching the Video Voters Guide, organized by the League of Women Voters of Portland. All candidates who filed for this race were invited to participate in the Video Voters Guide. However, there are many reasons during a campaign why a candidate may be unable to appear. For comprehensive coverage by the League, including information on candidates who might not have been available for a video interview, visit vote411.org. Information is available in both English and Spanish. Candidates may choose to include additional information on Vote 411, such as their own YouTube videos. Watch, share, and be an informed voter.
Greetings. I'm Debbie Kay, President of the League of Women Voters of Portland. Welcome to our voter election forum tonight for the May 18th, 2021 Portland Public Schools Board of Education election. I hope spring weather is raising your spirits as it is mine, and that you are feeling encouraged by greater vaccine availability. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that works to help citizens make informed choices in elections. We do not endorse any candidate or party. Rather, we give voters the information you need to select a candidate. We appreciate voter service support from the Weiss Foundation, the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation, and the League of Women Voters of Portland Education Fund, and from our media partner, Metro East Community Media, producing this program. We also thank the participating candidates, the moderator, and the League volunteers who donated their time and expertise to bring this program to you. Our community is on the occupied sacred lands and waters of many Indigenous peoples. We will never be as effective a steward as they, though we can certainly aspire to be in all of our actions. Ballots are being mailed as of today, April 28th. You have likely already received your Multnomah County voters pamphlet in the mail. All elections in Oregon are vote by mail. If returned to a ballot drop box or returned by mail to the elections division, your ballot must be received at either location by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, May 18th. If you return your ballot by mail, the elections division recommends mailing it by May 11th, and no postage is needed. All candidates were invited to provide information about themselves for our excellent election resource, vote411.org. In addition, all candidates were invited to participate in the League's Video Voters Guide. The interviews for those who chose to accept can be found through our website, LWV-PDX.org. Candidates for the school board come from individual zones, but are elected by all voters in the Portland School District. As usual, we invited all candidates who filed. The League of Women Voters values civil discourse and expects participants in our forums to behave respectfully toward each other and toward the moderator. I will now turn the program over to our moderator and our esteemed League colleague, Linda Mather. Thank you, Linda.
And thank you, Debbie. And everybody, welcome again to this forum for candidates for the Portland Public School Board. I am your moderator. I'm also part of the League, as Debbie has indicated. We are blessed with 9 candidates running for the school board. However, only 7 are with us tonight. Daniel Rogers from Zone 5 could not join us because of a work commitment, and Margot Logan has had technical problems in terms of catching up with us right now. However, each of the candidates will give a 1-minute opening statement and a 1-minute closing statement. In between, I will ask the candidates for the response to some questions. The candidates will have 1 minute and 30 seconds to answer each question. And we're asking the candidates please to adhere to the timing because there are 7 of you. In one instance, I will ask a question on the same topic, but not necessarily with the same focus, just to break up having all 7 of you answer the same one. So bear with that when we get to that point. So we're about ready to start our opening statements. Again, you have 1 minute to introduce yourself and your platform. And I should mention as we go through all of these, the order of answering will change. It has been randomized. But we will begin this part with Julia Brim Edwards. If you could, Ms. Edwards.
evening. I'm Julia Brim-Edwards. I have two thank yous. One to the League for providing this opportunity tonight, and two to all the candidates for the board seats for stepping up. This is a challenging and difficult, yet monumentally important volunteer position. As a PPS alum, a school parent for 18 years, and school activist for 2 decades, I've worked effectively with other parents, teachers, and school staff to make our schools better and to improve school funding to support students with smaller classes, more counselors, the basics, art, music, PE, more electives, career and technical training, and college prep classes. And I've worked with the school community to make sure that we've prioritized investments and resources to support and accelerate equitable outcomes for Black, Indigenous, students of color, special ed, and emergent English language learners. Welcoming our students back into schools and classrooms full-time in the fall is going to be a complicated and important milestone. I've stepped in to help lead Portland schools during its most challenging times, and I'm ready to do it again. I ask for your support in Zone 6. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. Hollins, could you give your opening statement, please?
Hello, yes. Once again, thank you guys for inviting me. My name is Gary Hollins. I am running for Portland Public School Board Zone 5. I am running for Portland Public School Board because I believe in our youth. As a husband, father, son, and business advocate, I understand what kids need to reach their full potential and their leadership. I have 3 parties that I am running that I want to have on the board. CTE and technical vocational educational expansion, closing and address that academic gap in reading and math for our Black and Brown students, and also increase the racial and cultural diversity of staff to reflect the kids that we serve. Once again, I'm Gary Hollins. I'm running for Portland Public School Board Zone 5. Thank you.
And thank you. And Ms. Kale, your opening statement, please.
Hi, I'm Jamie Kale. I'm running as a writing candidate for Zone 4. I'm born and raised in Portland. I also attended Portland Public Schools my entire education. I'm also a mom of 2 students, and I work in one of the most diverse schools in the district right now. I think that my long history within the district has given me the perspective of seeing the generations of students that the district has repeatedly failed. Our BIPOC students who are receiving special education services, and non-native speakers are repeatedly left behind, which causes disproportionate discipline rates, lower graduation rates, and a lack of engagement in school for these groups. I've always been a strong voice pushing the districts towards equity for the students mentioned above, of course, but for all other 49,000 students as well. It's time to address these inequities now. As a parent, community organizer, and social worker, I have the unique skill set to help right these wrongs and bring our district out of our pandemic crisis. It's time to reject racist policies and systems, and when I'm on the board, that will be my top priority. Once again, write me in for Zone 4. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Margolis?
Hi, greetings from Fork, Washington. I'm in a cabin right now. My name is Max Margolis, and I'm running in Zone 6. I'm running for school board because I have a daughter in the schools. She's in middle school. It has been a difficult sort of situation. My neighborhood, nobody goes to the neighborhood school. Some have tried and pulled their kids. Others have just simply enrolled in private schools. I've also seen many of my friends leave the city of Portland because of the frustration with the school district. So what I'm running on is equity and excellence. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I went to very diverse schools, and I think those 2 items go together very nicely, and I look forward to having a conversation with everybody, and I appreciate the League of Women Voters putting this forum together. And thank you.
And thank you. And Mr. Sherman, your opening statement?
Hello, I'm Brooklyn Sherman. I graduated from Jefferson High School in 2020. I went to PPS for over 13 years, even going to PPS for early intervention at Boise Elliott. I was in PPS's SPED program as a child, and my brother is now currently in their SPED program, and he's also on TAG. And I really am concerned about special education as I've been in it, as I see my brother in it. And I want to expand and really, be an example for their children as well, that they can succeed, that they can do things and be involved in politics. And I want to make sure that their voices are getting heard and that their problems are getting addressed.
Thank you.
And I'm running in Zone 4. I forgot to mention that.
That's okay. You got a few more seconds in there. Ms. Glenn?
Hi, I'm Libby Glenn. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to all of you for running as well. I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon. I attended Portland Public Schools from 3rd grade through 12th. I'm a Benson Polytechnic graduate. My daughter is a 5th grader at Bridger Elementary, or Bridger K through 8 currently. She's in the Spanish immersion program. For me, the achievement gap between BIPOC students and white students in this district is unacceptable. It continues to hover around 50%, and this has probably been an existing problem for more than a couple decades. I would like to see that close dramatically. I think it's important to give additional training and additional pay to teachers that are in need-based schools. The necessity for better communication coming from the district is important, and I'm looking for a truer equity out of PPS. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And Mr. Green?
My name is Herman Green, and I am running for the school board seat for Zone 4. I'm a husband of one for 27 years. I have 4 amazing kids who have all gone through PPS. They've all graduated from Roosevelt High School. I've volunteered in our current school system in North Portland for well over 20 plus years, dedicating my time to making sure that the marginalized, the underserved, the underrepresented, the kids who normally, and the families who normally don't have a voice at the table. I have worked with Latino families who needed somebody to come in and help to really speak up for them. I've worked for homeless families, houseless families, to make sure that they had a voice. And given the opportunity to be on the board, I'm going to continue to be their voice. Again, I'm Herman Green, and I'm running for Zone 4, and I'm looking for your vote.
Hey, thank you. And thank you all for squishing in to 60 seconds. So now you get all of 90 seconds to start on our questions. And Ms. Kale, you're going to start us off on the first one. We'll be talking, as we always do, about all the challenges that face the school district. But let's start with the positive. What excites you about the future of public education in Portland, and why? Ms. Kale, start us off.
I work in a school, so what excites me is the little babies I get to see every day. I know that they're going to grow up to be, 6 feet tall and do great things. I think the excitement I see when the students come in every day, especially even right now during school being a little different and looking different, they're excited to be there. They're excited to see their teachers, and they're excited to sit down and just like learn in person, especially our younger ones that haven't had that much time in school. I think the excitement and frenetic energy that kids bring is kind of what makes a school a home. And I think they've missed their second home. So I'm just happy that they get to come back, and I'm excited that we are moving forward into trying to make this all as normal as possible, knowing that in the fall we'll have even more kids back. So I think that's what I'm most excited about, that the kids are happy to be slowly gaining traction and working on the journey back to school, and that they are, happy to be there. We're happy to see them, and they're happy to see us. So I'm excited for what the fall brings.
Thank you. Ms. Glenn, what excites you?
I think we have a big, beautiful city, and we have lots of great residents. And I think our school children deserve the best. And it shouldn't matter what color you are. It shouldn't matter what school you attend. I think we should be putting out, some of the best and brightest for our future.
Thank you.
And yeah, so the children are number one.
Okay. And Mr. Green, how about you?
The thing that excites me most, actually, right now, as crazy as this might sound, is we're in this crazy season right now where everybody is open to want to see something change for all the students involved, and not just some of the students involved. We're in this season where everybody right now we're saying, let's look at the dollars that we're spending on our curriculums. Let's look at the dollars that we're spending in education. Let's look at the teachers that we're going to have in the classroom. Let's take a look at all of these things, and let's make sure that the BIPOC community, the students who have historically been left out, that we are intentional about making sure that they get all the services that they need. So the thing that excites me most about the season that we're in right now about education is that we're all actually open to try something different. We're not really continuing to do like the same old status quo. We don't want to see it to be done the way that it's always been done. So I'm excited because whenever you get this many people in a room, whenever you get this many people excited about seeing real change, systemic change, transformational change, then you're guaranteed to get change. And so the thing that I'm excited about is the fact that we're all tired of status quo. And so I'm excited about what the future holds for our educational system, and I'm excited to be a part of that change and transformation.
And Mr. Sherman, your excitement.
I'm excited about trying to bring in younger voices into this conversation, trying to convince them that even when they're done with PPS, that they should still participate with PPS and still be involved. I've been getting many of my friends who have also graduated from PPS coming back and helping me because they look back at their time at PPS and they want to improve. I'm also happy to see that the Chromebooks and hotspots, as of COVID, we handed out those to many students in need. And I'm glad that's finally being talked about, that how we don't provide enough technology to our students because we live in a world where they're going to need to have access to Wi-Fi. They're going to need to use electronics to succeed in whatever job they decide to go into. And I believe they should have access to that 24/7. And I'm glad that that's finally being discussed. And I want to expand on that. And I believe we need to get younger voices to talk about this issue because they're going to know more. They're going to have more experience. They're going to have grown up with the technology around them.
Thank you. And Mr. Margolis.
Hi. What excites me for the future is building on what Herman was talking about is the technology. I'm a reading tutor, and this year's been really interesting because I work with first through fourth graders, and the access I've had to stories that I would never have had in the classroom to match their interest at the moment to something right now has been wonderful. And I really hope that Portland Public Schools keeps building off the CDL because I've seen this. My daughter, it's the first year, 7th grade. She's really enjoyed that style of learning. I know it's not for every kid, but it also can be a great equalizer because there's now no reason, there's plenty of reasons or abilities for students in different schools to access great teachers in other schools because we've shown that that can happen. And I think this platform with CDL is exciting. It's challenged the district to think differently, and they've done a pretty good job of doing it, given the pandemic. So I think that's exciting that now some of these barriers are coming down through technology. But I am excited for school eventually to start back up because I've had a 12-year-old in the house straight. And I think we're all, this is a nice change of scenery, but a change of scenery will do everybody a lot of good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Hollins.
Oh man, I just could say ditto to everything everybody is saying. I am excited about the potential that we have at this time right now. I'm excited about the new opportunities that can come from where we're at right now. I think we have a great opportunity, especially with money that's flowing in, to really, like Herman said at another meeting, we can put our money where our mouth is now. We're talking about systemic changes, and we're talking about, making sure that we are putting the money where it's need to be at for the historically underserved kids. I'm excited about doing that work. I'm excited about getting boots on the ground. I'm excited about, the changes we're making. I'm excited about not having us doing things as usual. I think that is the biggest excitement for me, is that we have an opportunity to do different things. And so that's kind of what I'm really, really big excited about right now. And I'm excited to work with a board that I think is going in the right direction. And we can continue to grow on some, build on some of things that they're doing right now. Thank you.
And Ms. Brim Edwards.
Yeah, what excites me, I'm gonna second Jamie's thing, because I've been in the last 3 weeks, watch kids walk into their kindergarten class for their first time, high school students come back and be with their peers, and to see the sort of the magic that happens between our teachers, our support staff, and our students. It's exciting to know that we're going to be returning to our classrooms and the places where I think our students learn best. I'm also excited that there have been some innovations this year. Our teachers really did pivot to a whole different learning environment, and I'm excited because I do know that from talking to teachers that they're going to take some of those things that they've learned that have worked particularly well, especially with some students, and bring those into their just everyday teaching, even when we return full-time to school. So I'm excited to see that we're really seeing innovation coming out of that. I'm also excited about to see the resilience of our school community. I mean, this has been a tough year, and from our nutrition service workers, our parents, students, we've all hung together, and it tells me that our future together is bright. And I'm also excited about the new investments we're going to be making that I think will change the trajectory of outcomes to be more equitable in our district.
Don't mute, because we're going to start you on the next question. So get you ready and primed here. So for all of you, the next question. Of what significance are the values of consensus and civility to you individually and to the school board as a whole?
So the values of consensus and civility. I'm going to start with civility because I believe as board members, we're models for our students and the broader community. So how we treat each other are examples and models for how we would expect our students to treat each other. So we should treat each other with kindness and respect. That doesn't mean we can't pressure test each other's ideas. We can't disagree, but we can do it in a civil way. In terms of consensus, so I'm all for consensus if it's the right thing. I am not one to go along with the group if I disagree. I am a ferocious debater for my point of view and my values. And I do value consensus, and I always hope that you can reach that, but I also don't think that we necessarily need to have everybody in agreement all the time, because there's lots of different viewpoints in our community, and sometimes that tension and viewpoints is what actually gets us to a better place. And so I'm not afraid to be the lone vote or push others as well, because I think actually that leads to better decision making.
Thank you. And Ms. Kale, how about you?
I'm actually a trained mediator, so I do know that consensus is rare. Hardly ever happens that everybody gets what they want exactly the way they want it. A lesson that we should all hope that we learn really early, but it doesn't ever really stick, right? So I also don't think consensus is realistic in all situations, especially when it's a heated, passionate topic and everyone is just as heated and passionate as you are. But as Ms. Brim Edwards said, there's learning and knowledge to come from listening to people who have different opinions than you. I also think that there's a way to be civil, to use nonviolent communication to get your point across. You can be assertive and still be civil and polite. There's no reason to play a dirty game or to be mean or disrespectful to one another. So my hopes on the board would be to be able to just, be able to hear one another, listen to one another. You might not come together to agree, but at least you were there willing at the table to listen to one another. And that would be my goal.
Ms. Glenn, how about you?
Well, I think Aretha Franklin said it best, RESPECT. I believe, in respect of others, every person deserves respect, including children deserve respect. Kindness is key, absolutely. I don't want to sound cliche, but it is important. In terms of consensus, I really would like to push for active community forums sponsored by PPS on either a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, even depending, broken up maybe amongst zones. But I think that somehow these people's voices need to be heard other than the loudest white voice in the room. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Green.
I'm gonna start with stability. There is never a season, never a reason to be rude, mean, or disrespectful. There's never a time when we should talk at people, but we should always be speaking to people. And I learned a long time ago that if you smile when you're talking, it actually makes the tone and tenor actually come out a lot better. So you'll notice whenever I'm talking, I'm smiling because I want it to come out in a positive manner. And that's something that I would be modeling on the board. When it comes to consensus, I think I agree with all of us that when you sit down at a bargaining table, you recognize that, and nobody is going to win like everything. You know, in order for somebody else to win, it's like something else has to give away. And so what we're trying to do is how do we meet in the middle so that we can find a common ground for all of us to sit on where we can all win something. And so when we're listening, we should be actively listening to understand the other point of view, to understand why they're fighting the way that they are, why they believe the way that they do. And that should help us to make a decision. Now, at the end of the day, I'm going to vote for what I believe to be right, not just because everybody else is voting it, but it is imperative that I listen to understand both sides of the argument before making a decision.
And Mr. Hollins.
Well, I disagree with everybody. I think we don't need to be civil or a thing. So I'm joking. I am joking. One of the things I think that we have civility, we should have some humor with it. I think everybody's heart is for our kids. And so by knowing that, then we talk the issues and we don't talk to the person. You know, we're debating the issue and not debating the person. I think consistency, you know, if it happens, it happens. I think if it happens organically, then that's great. It's not a necessity in order to govern in an effective manner. One thing I would say about consistency, though, at least for me, is that even though we might disagree and the vote might split, once that vote is taken, I am going with the group from then on. You know, if I'm on the other side of it and it doesn't get done, I'm not going to try to do anything to thwart it or talk about it. I'm with the group at that point. So the consensus doesn't have to be before the vote or during the vote, but I think consensus has to be after the vote and everybody's going in that same direction because we all have the same values and all the same purposes for our kids. Thank you. Mr.
Margolis?
Yeah, well, I have 4 sisters, so I'm pretty, I compromise pretty easily. I think it's very important for my survival, but for other people's survival is to make sure everybody's heard. And I think there's a lot of emotions when it comes to schools. And especially on the board, you're going to have the grand scale scheme of things, and people in the community have their own issues as well. So it's a balancing act. But I think everybody working for kids, for increasing access to great education and making sure it's equitable is really important. And to have those discussions, because you can passionately have a different point of view, and you can do that in a way that is a nice conversation and maybe brings people along a little further towards you or not. But I do think, yeah, civility is key. I think if we're not listening to each other, that's a problem. And I've seen that. I've worked in a lot of different fields. I've worked with adjudicated youth. That's a hard job. I've worked with teens when I come in to do a drug prevention presentation. You have to learn to appeal to that audience, and reading tutoring when you have a kid who's struggling with reading to make them feel comfortable and confident and know that they can do it. And yeah, I'm all for consensus. So thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Sherman.
I believe it's really important to get more voices in the conversation. And I want you guys watching this video, the voters of Portland, to think about, when is the last time you saw someone on school board who wasn't a teacher or parent, who was a younger person, even under the age of 25, someone who had recently been in the system, who had personally experienced what it was like to have those modern counselors and have the modern system that is currently used in our school buildings? Can you name the last time you saw that person in the school board? And I'm not talking about the student representative, because they're a current student. They don't know what it's like to be in college and see what it feels like to feel like, do I know this? Did high school prepare me for this class I'm in now in college? Did high school tell me how the university was going to handle these issues? Did the counselors explain to me how much debt I'm going to get into, how much the textbooks are going to be? And especially right now, as many universities are closing down due to COVID, I have a friend, I keep on using her as my example because she'll let me, who got into Mills. But Mills is going to be bought out by Berkeley, I believe, is the university buying them out. And she now is concerned that she's not going to have those 4 years of Mills education that she was promised, that she worked really hard to get. And I'm concerned, and I want to make sure that our youth have people who are there to help them and who knows their experiences.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sherman. You are rising to the occasion of giving 7 different answers to the question. I appreciate that. Thank you. It's very good. We're going to do that again, but first, I'm going to split the next one. It's a money question. So I'm asking those of you in Zone 4, and we'll start with Mr. Sherman. What is the most significant staffing problem now for the school district, and how would you attempt to resolve it? And then that'll be followed by Mr. Green and Ms. Kale. So staffing problem. Mr. Sherman, start us off.
I think it's with the counselors, especially with the older grades and younger grades as well. I think with the counselors, oftentimes they don't understand the systems and programs that their students can be a part of. I myself, when I was in senior year of high school, I wanted to study abroad. I asked my counselor, how can I study abroad? They didn't have an answer for me. I had to go to PCC and ask one of those counselors to help me. And they had to do the job that a high school counselor was supposed to do. And I think this was a failure on the part of PPS, that they hadn't trained their counselor. Their counselor didn't know how to help me in my desire to want to study abroad. So I had to rely upon another system to help me. And I only got that because I was at Jefferson and they have the middle college program. If I was attending another high school, I don't know what I would have done. I think I just wouldn't have had any help. And I want to make sure that we have our counselors better trained to serve our students, and that we make sure that our counselors aren't overloaded with too many students. This way they can better train themselves to serve our students and spend more time with each student. I'm also concerned about the teachers as well. The teachers have continual education credits to do every 5 years or so. They have a lot of freedoms with how their continual education credits can be. I think we should start making their continual education credits have to be, at some point, not all of them, for special education and racial justice.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sherman. And Mr. Green, staffing.
When I think about the staffing and the issue, I really think about the retention of teachers of color. Before we can start bringing in saying we need to get more teachers of color in our buildings, and although I don't know the specific percentages, that's something that I got my team looking up for me because I want to know what that is. We have to make sure that the teachers of color that we do have in our buildings, especially within Zone 4, that they're excited about being there. Right now, a lot of our teachers of color are actually looking for work in other places because they don't feel valued and they don't feel like they matter in their current system. And so what I want to start looking at, and I want us to start focusing our energy on, is how are we retaining them? How are we giving them spaces as to where equity, where they can come in and they can share their grievances with one another. They can talk about what they're struggling with, and they can be supported. Until we can support our current staff, there's no way we're going to get new staff. But then I also want to work with the Portland Teachers Program, that the program that's working with PCC and PSU, so that we can start sending more students of color through the program and encouraging them to come into our schools from our community, because we're going to make a difference when we put more of us in place to make a change. So retention of teachers of color.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Kale.
I agree with both my great colleagues here. We do definitely need more counselors and wraparound services, and I agree with needing teachers of color. Our district is almost half students of color, and we only have 20% teacher student of color, and that number is dropping every year. So we definitely do need to recruit more teachers, more counselors. But I actually, being in a school every day, I think one of our most needed positions we need more paraeducators and more educational aides. We have students that don't fit inside the traditional box and find it hard to sit still in class for all day. And we don't have enough adult supervision to be able to just take them for a walk or to take them to the corner and do a manipulative. We are doing a disservice to students that are receiving special ed by not having enough adult trained staff to assist them.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to turn to a different kind of money thing, a little broader. For Zone 5 and 6, what other budgetary challenges do you see facing the school district? And Mr. Margolis, if you would start us off, please.
Well, I think a budget challenge facing all Oregon schools is the tax issue. And that's a really complex issue, but we have a lot of money for capital building projects, but it's the human capital of the people in those buildings that the way the Measure 5 and 50 before my time has really restricted what schools can do. So they can do, and I appreciate the new high schools that are being built, they needed to be done, but able to have services for people, of teachers. So I see that as a struggle for all school districts to manage, is there's restraints in the tax code and what projects can go to. And I just want to echo what Jamie was saying in terms of paraeducators or tutors. There's other lower cost ways to help kids get their education needs met, and they can be innovative with that. But I do realize that the board has a major problem to balance what the state taxes allows them to take. But as a citizen, I get worried that we have all of these nice new buildings, but we're not having enough people money for those services.
Thank you. And Mr. Hollins, your take for budget?
So I think some of the budget challenges is going to come a little bit later on down the road. We always have a budget issue with the state, whether they're going to fully fund the PPS or not. Just last night I was on the call, and they was talking about some of the shortfalls that could be if the state didn't fund at, I think it was 9.3 billion versus 9.1. And I think also with a lot of the monies that's coming in, I think sustainability is going to be a budget challenge. With the federal funds that are coming in, is that going to be sustainable over the long term? A lot of these funds there are restricted funds, so they can only be used for certain things. So I think one of the budget challenges is how do we sustain some of the new programs that we're going to be implementing after the federal government's money is ran out. Thank you.
Ms. Glenn?
I think we need some changes to, tax reform. But I think that there's a lot of money that is earmarked for the cannabis tax that goes to state police. And instead, I think a lot of those funds could be directed to education. In my opinion, education has been underfunded continuously in this state, not just the district, but by the state. But but there was, there's other disappointments, even though things have been earmarked in bond measures that we're running 25% over in construction costs on the 2017 bond. The 2020 bond has money earmarked for curriculum, but that wasn't a normal budget line item that that PPS was allotting for. And curriculum is extremely important. So that in some cases, like science curriculum hadn't been updated in 20 plus years, which, I'm glad that they've earmarked some money under that bond, but we keep overspending on these bonds so that the bonds are going to have to keep on passing, with the expectation that there's going to be another bond measure in 2024. We keep asking the voters to vote for more money, but we're running over on our previous bonds.
Thank you. And Ms. Brim Edwards.
Thank you. So if I look at the biggest resource issue, I would say it would be that we continue to ensure that all students citywide have sort of the basic equitable offerings. And if you're in elementary school, that you have access to art, music, PE, and not just because your parent community can afford to pay for those, but that the school district pays for it. And the same thing with the middle grades, that we make sure that there's equitable resources. And that may mean that different schools get different levels of funding, again, because a parent community may not be able to fund it, or because of the level of enrollment, that the middle grade students get a diverse array of electives so that they're passionate about something in their school day. And then at the high school level as well, that we make sure that across the city, we don't have inequitable offerings, that if you are interested in college prep or career technical education, that whether you go to Lincoln or Roosevelt or Franklin, that you have access to that. So while I think we can make we need additional investments in a host of classroom pieces, I also think we need to take a really sharp look at how we distribute that and have it be more equitable.
Thank you. Let's shift gears a little bit, and let's see, Mr. Green, I'm going to start with you. As you know, probably all of you, that there is movement at the state level to require civic education in the school districts to teach civic education. What is the appropriate level of involvement of the board in establishing specific curricular for subjects to be taught? Start us off, Mr. Green.
I wish I had a lot more information on how to properly answer that question. But from a board perspective, I would think that we would be looking at how we're using our dollars, and I'm not even sure how I would go about answering that question.
Okay, Ms. Glenn.
I know it's even been brought up that, that we allow younger people to start voting, and somewhat controversial that, some younger people are actively pursuing wanting to vote at age 16. If we're going to pursue a course in civil education, maybe that would be appropriate. I don't know, kids are, frustrated. They have to deal with the circumstances and the results of decisions that are made by adults for their lives. So why not, give greater access? I think civil education would be an important element to add to the curriculum, just to, so you ensure proper, guidance, and ensure that, kids are learning about the democratic process.
Mr. Sherman?
I believe civic education is very important, and I feel like oftentimes, you have to get that outside of the classroom. I felt like most of my civic education came for working for Teresa Rayford and working on her mayoral campaign and just participating in Don't Shoot PDX. And I believe that shouldn't always have to be the case, since not every student's going to actively choose to get a job for Teresa Rayford. They're going to have to, learn about it somewhere else. They're going to have to hopefully have someone come into the building, talk to them, and to teach them better, especially in history classes. I personally felt like my history classes were very repetitive, and I think we should not have that happening.
Okay, let me repeat the question in the sense that I was using the civic education proposed at the state level to ask what's the appropriate level of involvement for the board for Portland schools, for example. So, Mr. Margolis, want to give it a go?
I'll give it a go.
Yeah, you can't say no, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have any choice. Look, the Portland, there's a lot of people that work in the district office that review curriculum, and I would expect that they would be able to provide the board with maybe 3 good choices or a different overview of some of the strengths of a civic education and what curriculum they're leaning towards with a team of teachers, making sure it's geared towards, the elementary level, the middle school level, and the high school level, and making sure it is, culturally competent, engaging, interesting, timely, all those things that, Brooklyn was mentioning that history class currently wasn't for him. But I do think it's in a really exciting time right now to be alive in the United States. And I think that curriculum needs to reflect it. And I think the board should have, some say obviously where the purchases are made and the direction of it, but it's got to come from the professional. It's got to come from the school and the district office as to, hey, this is why we're going to do this civic education. These are some of the goals of it. This is how it complies with what the state's expectations are, because people need it. I mean, we have serious deficits in how people understand history. And there's a lot of things that good curriculum could do to make that up. So I would hope that the district office would provide good choices for the board to choose from.
Thank you. Ms. Kale.
Oh, I'm already unmuted. Sorry about that. I've never been on a board, but I have watched a lot of board meetings because I don't have anything better to do on Tuesday nights. And I do know that the board was instrumental in bringing the climate change curriculum, bringing indigenous population curriculum. And one thing I think I enjoyed watching was the discourse of them asking questions, of learning more. I mean, I'm not a curriculum expert. I don't do pedagogy for a living. So I would definitely ask questions, research on my own, kind of hear what the choices were and what would be the best for our students. And I'd want to make sure it was vetted and rigorous and relevant to our students here in Portland. Maybe it might have worked for students in Delaware, but we want to make sure it would also work for our students in Portland. So I think I would want to ask questions, learn more, and use maybe my other board members who might have more experience in the area of voting for curriculum, and also using that executive team that we have for a reason, because they are the experts to answer those questions.
And Mr. Hollins.
And can you repeat the question one more time for me, please?
Sure. Except the first half I ad-libbed, so let's see if I can do it. The state legislature is looking at mandating civic education in the schools. Question: what is the appropriate level of involvement of the board in establishing specific curriculum for subjects to be taught? What's the role of the board?
Well, I think, at the 60,000 level, we will really have to refer to like our administration and our teachers to really see what their viewpoints on that was. And then just kind of go by that guide of what our teachers and our administrators are saying. Get into the type of curriculum that is needed. I think that is really at the teacher level and having their input on that. I think that's the way the board should go as far as governance of that piece. At the 60,000 foot level, getting into what curriculum they are having, I think it's going a little bit into the weeds. But I think by listening and talking with the teachers and talking with, community partners to see what that should look like, I think that's how, at the board level, we should govern that decision.
Thank you. And Ms. Brumetto.
So last night, this question came up. We had a recommendation from staff on a middle school science curriculum and materials. There had been a long process where lots of middle school science teachers had been consulted and engaged in the process, and the board approved it. And I think it's the board's job to pressure test it a little bit, use our experiences, but if we're not an educator, I think from my perspective, which I'm not, is to defer to the educators. I, for one, really miss the presence of Julia Esparza Brown, who was a board member, who cycled off, but she had expertise in both special ed and reading. And we could always rely on her to offer sort of from the board table perspective, but generally, I think we should listen to the educators who this is what they do, and they're the professionals. I do think the board has a role in terms of asking, after we've had a curriculum adoption, of asking, is it effective? Are we seeing the results that we expected? And I think that's perfectly appropriate role for board members to ask. I will say sometimes the state doesn't, or the district doesn't have something in our curriculum that the board does need to step up. As Jamie mentioned, climate. The board also, while the state legislature said students didn't have to take world languages, PPS decided that was going to be a part of our curriculum.
Okay.
And I support civics, I should just say.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question, and it's going to start with Mr. Sherman. What are your thoughts about naming or renaming various facilities in the school district?
I believe if that's what the students and faculty and community want, I believe we should rename the schools. You know, I know with Jefferson, they tore down the Jefferson statue. And for my entire senior year, written on the statue was slave owner. People were not happy. But we also have to, you know, after we get rid of the old names, there's the conversation of what will the new names be? And my concern is, are we having that conversation with the students? Are we having it with the community and with the teachers and with the custodians and everyone else? And because those school names as well, when people look back, they think of, you know, I don't think of Jefferson, the president. I think of Jefferson High School when I look back at where I went. And we have to make sure that these new names are something that the community can connect to and relate to. And this way, everyone will still have that communal bond. You know, but the schools do need to change their names if that's what the students and faculty and community want.
Mr. Hollins?
I think this is a hot topic. So naming the schools, I think when you look at systemic racism and you're looking at the names of some of these schools, it just continues to perpetuate that covert racism attitude. Even though no one has been here who's been in slavery or what have you, those names are associated with that. And so when you're looking at naming the schools, you have to look at the history behind that person. They just did a great deal with Ida B. Wells. And I think that was real important on how they came up with a solution. The board challenged it, Mr. Pass challenged that. And then last night they came back with a new, and I think even better plan and a better mascot for the school. So I think done right, renaming schools from bringing it from systemic racism point of view to more of an inclusive and a more positive light is a great thing. And I think it's going to be a great thing for Ida B. Wells and the oh gosh, what's the name?
Leotis McDaniels.
So I think that's a great thing. And so, and like I heard Julia say all the time, when you're talking about naming a school for 100 years, you have to really be mindful of that. Thank you.
That's why there's more than one brain around here. Okay, Mr. Green.
Yeah, I think we're getting consensus now because I don't have a large issue with renaming the schools. I have an issue with renaming the schools just because we feel like that's what everybody else is doing and we ought to do it. We need to be taking a look at why we want to rename the schools. We need to look at the values. We need to look at what it represents. We need to look at what it reflects, because there are going to be a lot of people who went to that school who didn't necessarily equate to, because I'm thinking about, they're talking about Roosevelt right now, and that's my school. I didn't go there, but that's my school, and they're talking about renaming it now. And there are going to be a lot of people saying there's nothing wrong with Roosevelt, but it's what the name for some represents. How the indigenous community, he made a lot of good stuff, but it was on the back of a lot of indigenous communities, and how a lot of indigenous communities were slaughtered so that we can get the parks that we did. So although we talk about our amazing parks, we don't talk about all the blood that was spilled to get those parks. And so when we're talking about renaming the schools, we need to be educating the community transparently around the why behind the renaming of the school. That we're not just simply doing it because it's a trend. We're doing it because it no longer aligns with the values that we want to represent.
Thank you. And Ms. Kale.
I think we change the names of the high schools and any schools, other schools we need to, because we know better, we do better. That's what we need to do. I went to Harvey Scott, who's now just Scott, because Harvey Scott wasn't a great guy. So they dropped the Harvey a long time ago. I also went to the former Madison High School. And I do know there's a lot of even friends of mine that went to Madison with me that now McDaniels that are very upset by the change. But frankly, it doesn't matter. If we're trying to be an anti-racist district and show that we are trying to get rid of these, antiquated racist policies and names, we go out there, we explain why we're doing it, but we still do it. And we involve the community. We do as many forums as we can. We get everyone involved, but we make the stance that we're going to do it because it's the right thing to do. We know it's the right thing to do, so we do it.
Ms. Brim Edwards.
So I think this is something we need to do because, names have meanings. And I was fully supportive of the changing of Ida B. Wells Barnett High School and also Leotis McDaniels High School. And I think we have some other work to do. Joseph Lane was not somebody that we should honor by naming one of our schools after. Same thing with Harvey Scott, and even calling him Scott. I mean, he was vehemently opposed to women having the right to vote, and has a really bad record on Native issues. And so I do think this is part of actually building critical thinkers among our students. And Brooklyn, I hope you have an opportunity to look at the work that the school communities did in the renaming process, because students were centered in the middle of those conversations, especially students of color. And the presentation that we've had from the students about the renaming of Ida B. Wells, the students were the most effective advocates and spokespeople about why it was important that we rename these schools. And I think unlike other jurisdictions, PPS has approached it in a way that's going to be community-based and student-focused. We're not going to just wholesale do all the schools, but we're going to go through it, and it's also going to be a critical learning experience for our students.
Ms. Glenn?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with all the other panelists. I attended William Clark, which if it was up to me, I'd call it Sacagawea. It's currently Creative Science School. I attended Binsmead Middle School. They renamed it Harrison Park. I'm still curious why it was not named after maybe someone meaningful to the district. I think that's what I like so much about the name change for Leotis McDaniel, is that he was a community member and he's a community leader, and he worked at Madison High School in the 70s and 80s. And, so there's people alive, there's kids, students' lives that he affected directly. And so it brings a lot of pride to our city. to be naming, our schools after actual local leaders.
And Mr. Margolis.
I'm for name changes. I don't think we should name schools after people. We have to start naming these after ideals or things for excellence that we want. That would be one suggestion, because people are flawed. But if the community wants to make the change, absolutely. I'm glad that the school has a system for that. I wish McDaniels would have had the name McDaniel Principals, because I thought that would have been a good mascot, but nobody agreed with me. But I thought that would be kind of cool. But yeah, if the schools, especially the ones that are really problematic, and if there's a real move to that and the school board has a form to make that happen, I think that's great. But I think we need to maybe think about not naming buildings after people, because people are flawed, and we're always going to learn that throughout history. So those are my thoughts on it.
I need some agreement from you all. We don't quite have enough time for a 90-second hefty question. I'd like to give you a 60-second question, and it's what I would call a soft question. So if you would think about your answer within 60 seconds, okay, because you're also getting tired. So think about your school experience. What was a teacher or experience that made a big difference for you? Right? Teacher or experience that made a big difference for you. And we'll start with Ms. Brim Edwards, please.
Yeah, I have two teachers at Glencoe Elementary. Mr. Booz, who's my shop teacher, and I was in the second year of girls being able to take shop. And he welcomed us into his classroom, treated us fairly, and gave me something that I was passionate about to come to school. And my other teacher who had a big impact on me was Mr. Johnson, who was my PE teacher, who still lives in the area, and he demanded excellence. And when you demand excellence from students, they raise their game. And to me, that was just a great example of somebody telling me I could do better or I could achieve excellence, and setting a new bar. And to me, that's been a lifelong lesson, set those high bars.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hollins, how about you?
Yes, I have three. One is Mr. Davis. He was my electronics teacher at Benson High School. He won, and all three of them are African American males, which was a huge impact on me growing up. He actually taught me how to think bigger and think more detailed about what I wanted to do as I got older. Another one is Mr. McKenzie, who was our track coach, and Mr. Mays, who was the track coach as well. They really provided the stability. And for me, at my time growing up, that was really huge, especially in the time that I grew up. It was a lot of gangs and a lot of drugs ramping through our city. And those Black men showed me stability. They showed me that working together, and they showed me the value of hard work, and that they are there for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Margolis.
Teachers that have been major influences. Well, first, the principal I had in elementary school, Mr. Nichols, first grade, had a speech impediment. Kids made fun of my freckles. I got in a fight. I remember going to his office in the light and him really talking to me. And in fifth grade, I got the principal's award. So there was some growth there. And then also Dean Lightfoot, he was a dean in middle school. And I remember I learned persuasive arguments, because everything I'm saying is about a fight. But I got a fight with Michael Donatucci. And I remember convincing him not to give me in-school suspension because I was attacked. And I laid out a very clear argument, and I got out of it. So I've always appreciated it. In public education, my home was kind of unstable growing up. Having that predictable place to go that challenged me, and great teachers from all different kinds of walks of life, has just been fundamental to my life. So I'm really grateful the government provided that for me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sherman.
I would go with my high school science teacher for freshman and senior year, Mr. Napoli. He was the first time in my life that I saw a special ed person. He had dyslexia growing up, and he told me about that. First time in my life, I saw an adult who had overcome those struggles and had succeeded. And I'd seen other adults who had dyslexia or autism like myself. I saw them in the roles of janitors, and I saw them in low-paying jobs. And seeing him as an educator succeeding and being charismatic inspired me. It inspired me to know that I can succeed, that I can do great things.
Thank you. And Mr. Green.
I would have to say for me that it was my fourth grade teacher, Miss Moon. I grew up in a time where you could actually get paddled and you could get 3 licks from the principal if you got in trouble. And I had a reading. I didn't like to read. And so whenever it came my time to read, I would act out, take my licks, but at least I wouldn't have to be embarrassed about not being able to read. And so it was my turn to read, and I got ready to act out, and Miss Moon stopped me. She said, I know what you're trying to do. You can do this. Take your time and go slow. I tried to act out. She said, I'm not going to send you to the office. I know what you're trying to do. Take your time and do this. And that changed the game for me. And so I took my time. I walked through it. It took a little bit longer, but I got through it. And in that moment, what I learned was slow down sometimes. Take your time and you can get it.
Okay, Ms. Glenn.
I'm going to give 3 like Gary. Carol McQueen was my 4th grade teacher in a 4th and 5th grade split class. So very challenging circumstances. She also went on to teach at our middle school later. Catherine Turtek, who was the choir director at Binsmead Middle School. She had an impact on kids for 30 plus years. And Leon McKenzie, he was my high school counselor. And I hope he considers me one of his kids, because I am.
And Ms. Kale.
You said experiences or teachers. I'm going to go with experience. I grew up in a rather chaotic house. I lived with my grandparents most of the time, and 6th grade was really, really hard because my mom had been gone for a while and I didn't know where she was. And we got to go to outdoor school, and I was terrified because I'd never been camping. I didn't own a pair of hiking boots. I didn't do that. It sounded like, basically it sounded like torture. Then I showed up and I met my counselor and I met my cabin mates, and it was a life-changing experience, which led me on to continue to be a counselor in high school. And then I actually majored in education and then switched to social work because I'm not a teacher. But that experience just showed me what a wonderful program it is, and that kids who wouldn't get to experience, what it's like to live out in the forest and learn about trees and animals and soil and things you'll never get to learn, that it was life-changing for me. And I'll never forget going, and I will always fight to keep that program as a program for all of our kids because they all deserve to go.
Okay, we turn now to the closing statements. Remember, it's 60 seconds. And Mr. Margolis, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you very much for this forum. It's been really interesting for me. I've decided to run back in February, living in the COVID world. And in terms of a civics class, if you can spend $10 and get yourself on the ballot and get to have a conversation with the superintendent, fellow board members, answer endorsement panels, and all these things, it's a great thing for people to do. And I really appreciate the opportunity. I'm running because I really believe in public education. I'm very concerned about the achievement gap. I think the board can do better and help the superintendent do better. And I appreciate the opportunity to get my voice out there. And I hope other people will do the same, because we really need to step up how our kids are performing. And I want neighborhood schools to be better. And I think for the elementary kids to get the reading levels up to where they need to be will make education better. Thank you so much for the time today.
Ms. Glenn?
I think, across the board, every student deserves the same education. Every student deserves the effort. And like I said in the beginning, if we have to put more funding into schools in need, then we should put our funding there. And we should give teachers additional training. We need more counselors, especially at the elementary level. We really need to work to push for the Center for Black Excellence, because I think that would add a lot to our community overall. And yeah, I think I just want to give anything else a try at this point, because I think a lot of parents and teachers are frustrated, and administrators, and that there's a lack of communication in the district. And we're spending, average Portland Public School student receives $2,000 more than the top 11 districts in Oregon.
Thank you. And Ms. Brim Edwards?
Thank you. I'm optimistic about our future, especially after tonight's forum with all these great candidates, and I'm ready to work with parents, staff, and students as we recover from this pandemic year. I've been an effective student-focused leader, working with other board members. I led the successful superintendent recruitment, chaired the 2020 bond to modernize and improve the health, safety, and accessibility of our school buildings, demanded more accountability, open to middle schools so that more than 1,000 students have a more equitable middle grades experience, and secured more funding for academic supports for students who need it most. And because of this, I've been endorsed by a diverse group of community leaders and parents, and you can find the full list on www.juliaforportlandschoolboard.com, along with some of the other work I've done and my ideas. This morning, I was endorsed by the Oregonian Willamette Week, and as voters get their ballots, I hope that you'll take an opportunity to learn more about the work I've done, and I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kale?
I just want to, remind people I'm running as a write-in, but I do believe that my voice is needed right now. I have recent and relevant experience in schools today. I'm in schools every day. I know what is happening in schools and how hard it has been to slowly open them, and what it's going to take to help keep them open and make a stronger fall opening. I have prior board experience. I've been on state PTAs. I've worked for the national PTA, know how to work on a board. I used to train boards in governance. So that doesn't scare me, nor does the 20 to 25 hours extra amount of work a week to be on the board. I will always push for equity in the district, and I also really want to build that connection between what feels like 3 different islands right now, between parents and students and the school district. I think we all need to become connected again so that we can work together, and together we'll build a stronger district, and that's what we need. So thank you.
Mr. Green?
For over 20 years, I have committed myself to volunteering within our school system because I believe in the family, I believe in the community, and I believe in making sure that people who feel left out, making sure that they have a voice at the table. For over 20 years, I've worked with teachers, I've worked with community to bridge the gap, to minimize the divide, to bring us all to the table so that we can all focus on what we all believe to be true, which is our children's future, and to make sure that we give them the best possible opportunity to be the best version of themselves. And because of that, I think that's the reason that I've got well over 200 endorsements. I think that's the reason that the Oregonian endorsed me, the Willamette Week, and all the other ones, because I don't just represent big business. I represent the little guy that's sitting at the table that just wants to make sure that someone is listening to him. And when you put me on the board, that's what you're going to get.
Thank you. And Mr. Hollins?
Yes, thank you. My passion for kids has been growing in me since I was little. And the things that I want to make sure that our kids have are some of the things that I didn't have, as far as stability, getting a great education with Portland Public Schools. I just feel like our kids deserve the best. And, and I think we owe it to them to give them the best that we have. It's just our kids are so important, and we need to make sure we stay children centered. And that's what I plan on doing. And so, I always say a vote for me is a vote for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Sherman.
I think more young people, I keep on saying this over and over again tonight, should participate in politics. And I know a lot of you guys who are younger might be like, I'm scared I'll be written off, because you will be written off. The news organizations, groups like Pat are going to write you off. They're going to think you're too young, too inexperienced, not knowledgeable enough on issues like bonds. They're going to write you off, and that's okay. You just got to show up and keep on trying. Keep on demonstrating that you do know, that you are knowledgeable. And they are not going to give you their endorsements a lot of the times, but that's okay. You should keep on trying. And if you're a young person thinking about running for something in the future, understand I will be there for you. I'm trying to even start a little YouTube series on my YouTube channel. Just look it up, Brooklyn Sherman for PPS. And I want to talk about how you as a younger person, if you're watching this, can participate in politics, because your voice should be heard.
And thank you. It's time to say thank you to all of you, because you're candidates, you're willing to show a commitment to democracy and by running, by being an elected official. And you've made several comments. It's a 25 hours extra in the week that you could just be sitting in your backyard, but no, you're going to be committed. And of course, it circles around to all of the teachers and the experiences that you had in school, and it's kind of payback time. So yeah, we want to pay it forward. Anyway, I want to thank you also for your cooperation tonight and your thoughtful answers. I'm not usually seeing candidates have so much fun together, so I thank you all. And let me turn it now to Debbie for a closing. Debbie?
Thank you, Linda, and thank you all. The League of Women Voters appreciates the candidates for making time to participate in this forum. We appreciate learning more about you and how you would approach issues if elected to the Portland School Board. We invite you and the viewers to share this program with your family and friends. Again, we believe in informed voters. The League is a membership organization. We would be happy to have you join us. We would also value your financial support in presenting these and other programs for our community. Please see our website for donor and membership information at LWVPDX.org. This is Debbie Kay, President of the League of Women Voters of Portland. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. Again, ballots must be received either at a designated ballot drop box or in the Office of the Elections Division by Tuesday, May 18th at 8 p.m. Postmarks do not count. And remember, your vote matters. Thank you.